KBLA Talk 1580. Good morning and God bless. I'm Dominique DiPrima. This show, first things first, my first thing every day, giving thanks, giving praise, asking for blessings to the Most High, asking for the blessings of the ancestors and the elders, and getting my grind going right now. So today is the 30th, actually, of March. Tomorrow will be 3 years since Nipsey Hussle made his transition, and we are going to pay tribute to him today. Why not tomorrow, you may ask? Well, tomorrow I have been enlisted to do something special with Dr. Angela Davis, and I will not be here. So you will have the talented and incredibly knowledgeable Ariva Martin sitting in my spot. But I didn't want to let this week go by without acknowledging Nipsey as we broadcast from Crenshaw, really not far at all from his store and right around the corner from many of the folks in his life. So we're going to talk to a few different people that can give us some insight, pay tribute in one way or another to Nipsey Hussle. We will still continue with all of the things that we typically do around here. So that means hour one, headlines and hot topics with a partner in politics. And I'm excited to have BLMLA / Students Deserve activist Joseph Williams with me today. And good morning. You hear me?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. I know. I'm sorry. I'm making you talk at 6 a.m. But I really, but I appreciate.
I'm here.
You're here.
I'm here with you.
You're all the way here. Yeah, and I'm knowing you probably have a thing or two to say about Nipsey Hussle as well. I mean, certainly when we talk about L.A., that the topic of that brother and the inspiration that he gave in terms of buying the block, if nothing else, is very relevant.
Absolutely. And for me, particularly working with young people and seeing the impact that Nipsey had on young people, particularly around, the Crenshaw district, but also around the entire city, and the impact of Nipsey's loss on the young people that I worked with was massive. So really appreciate you uplifting and honoring Nipsey the day before this 3-year anniversary. Really felt the impact that his loss had on the city and particularly the young people of LA.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I saw it in Africa. I was in Nigeria not in 2019, and I saw people in the streets of Lagos wearing Nipsey Hussle shirts, and the marathon continues, and people really mourning the loss of this guy from South LA. It was pretty amazing and pretty awe-inspiring, really.
Absolutely, and I think a big part of that was, that his message was much bigger, than what some folks traditionally look at as hip hop or gangster rap, right? That he had such a deep message about caring for and uplifting the community that he was from. Even though that community was impoverished and inflicted by different, forms of communal violence and other things, it was very important, for Nipsey to rep his city, his neighborhood, and do that in a positive light. Like you said, buy back the block and empowering other folks to take ownership over their cities and their communities is absolutely a huge part, of why his impact was so widely felt, his loss was so widely felt.
And, of course, hour two of the show, we typically go national and sometimes international. And I do what I call freestyle phones, which means you can change the subject. You can call and talk about anything you want to inform us about, share with us, do some fellowship, yell at us. It's all on the table. 800-920-1580. The other thing we do, hour three, we do what I call a daily deep dive, where we talk to different people of expertise and interest. Today we'll have a selection of different people who have an angle on the life and impact of Nipsey Hussle. So we'll hear from a variety of folks, and I'm actually really looking forward to that. continue our conversation, though, right now. I'm so glad Joseph Williams is with me today because we do have a lot to talk about, not just the Lakers going down to 11th place, but also the now conversation about a cover-up where Sheriff Villanueva is denying that he played a role in a cover-up and did a big dog and pony show press conference. Love to hear what Mr. Williams has to say about that as we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Your ancestors' favorite radio station, and your favorite morning show host. Let's get back to Dominique DiPrima right now.
And it's astounding that we have an election coming up that we think of as in June, which is really just a little while from now, but actually voting starts in May, which is about 30 days from now. So it's time to turn it up. What's amazing to me, Joseph Williams, is that we are even considering reelecting the current sheriff. I mean, the fact that he is even in the running is amazing, right?
Absolutely. And this, this most recent incident is just the latest example of why it's amazing and horrible that he's still, even considering reelection for himself.
Yeah, well, yeah. So Villanueva now saying that he actually turned on his own department and started pointing fingers at some of the high-ranking members of his department on yesterday, accusing them of trying to cover up an incident where a deputy knelt on the head of a handcuffed and incarcerated person for more than 3 minutes. He called a news conference, kind of a last-ditch, news conference because it's election season. And he said that this incident, which happened about a year ago, was something he didn't know about. He said that he wasn't involved in the cover-up. He said he had shaken up his senior command. That's what he told the LA Times, but he wouldn't give them specific details about exactly what that means. And he said he's going to do an investigation. He also named an acting assistant sheriff, Holly Francisco, to oversee countywide operations. But basically, it seems like this incarcerated person was, right around the time of a lot of protesting going on over George Floyd, had his head kneeled on for over 3 minutes. And then the department declined to move forward with the prosecution of this person because they did not want this to come out.
Right. And I think, what's really funny is what you said first is that he's blaming now someone else, right? First it wasn't a cover-up, and now he's blaming, folks that it might be a cover-up. And he's always blamed other people when issues have come up, when his department has been accused. He's blamed activists. He's blamed the Office of the Inspector General. He's blamed the Board of Supervisors. He's blamed the Civilian Oversight Commission. He's blamed the families of those who have been murdered by his deputies. He's always blaming someone else for the misconduct that's going on in the sheriff's department and still expecting, a vote, right, a re-election. And so, right, you're right. This is just another example. And this man, kneeled on, happened right before jury selection in the George Floyd trial. It was absolutely a cover-up. I'm sure he knew about it. And once again, he's pointing, fingers at someone else and casting blame somewhere else instead of taking responsibility for the ongoing misconduct and abuse, that is just rampant in the sheriff's department.
Yeah, and that's another way in which he channels the former president, the 45th president. It's the blame game, it's the megalomaniac blame game. And, yet he goes around saying that he's a Democrat and he lied to get into office, saying, he was going to do clean things up and do things differently, promised an investigation into what happened with Mitrice Richardson and to get to the bottom of her disappearance when she was last seen alive in the hands of the sheriffs. And, of course, he hasn't done that. That's, we're way past that now.
Right. And in fact, he's done the opposite, right? Instead of actually investigating sheriff misconduct like he claimed that he would when he was running, he's made it worse. He's emboldened sheriff misconduct. He's emboldened sheriff's deputies to be involved in gangs. He's emboldened sheriff's deputies to harass families because he harasses the families of those who have been murdered by the sheriffs, right? When they come, the family of Anthony Vargas, the family of so many folks who have been murdered by the sheriffs, right? When they've come and demanded accountability, right? They've been vilified by the sheriff. They've been mocked. They've been targeted, right? And so, this is another example of the disgusting behavior, like you said, very much like Trump, the Trump of LA, absolutely, who commands a multi-billion-dollar budget and rules with very little oversight, right? Has refused oversight from the Oversight Commission, has refused oversight from the Inspector General, has refused oversight from the Board of Supervisors, and yet continues to expect us, to believe that he can handle the misconduct that is ongoing within the Sheriff's Department.
Yeah, and that's not optional oversight. That's voter mandated oversight. It's not like,
right.
Would you like some oversight, Mr. Sheriff? No, that's not how that works. It's like saying, I refuse to, clock into work if you have a job that has a time clock. That's not something
Absolutely.
Optional. Yeah.
Openly defying subpoenas, right? Stuff that others of us would be thrown in jail for, right? He does openly,
Yeah, and speaking of the gangs of LA, I think to me this is an area where our current sheriff, he's even less slick than Donald Trump, if that can be amazingly true. Because if you think about it, he initially denied there were gangs. Then within the sheriff's department. Then he took credit for cleaning up the gangs. Then he denied it again. And, and now he kind of continues to alternate between those two talking points, which are, mutually canceling. They both can't be true.
Right. And he says whatever is convenient for him in the moment. If he wants to say that he's cleaned up the department, and he says that he's cleaned up the department. If he wants to put on the, hardline pro law enforcement, to pander to some of his base, then he'll say, oh, these are just cliques. These aren't deputy gangs. And, they're the ones protecting the community, even though we know that these are the folks who are terrorizing, literally killing folks like Andres Guardado so that they can become, parts of different deputy gangs. Right. So disgusting how he continues to get away with this. And we've got to make sure that folks know so that he can't continue to get away with this and get reelected.
I mean, yeah, and if you look at the work of Cerise Castle, the journalist, if you look at the work of the Loyola Marymount, report, their investigation, where they said there are at least 18 deputy involved gangs, it's clear that this man is lying. And it just really worries me that because we have so many people running and because he's so skillfully sort of whipped up the MAGA situation, he's gotten free airtime, lots of free airtime on a local right-wing talk outlet, even his own show, and he is constantly on Fox News. I'm concerned that he may get reelected, and if that happens, I believe the terror will ramp up because he'll have, a whole nother term to do whatever.
Absolutely. And I think, that's why it's not just about this election. It's also about some of the different state safeguards, that folks, again, chief of which are the families of those who have been impacted by sheriff's violence have been pushing. And I know they've been pushing, charter amendments to input even more protections, for citizens against the sheriff's department and for elected officials to take against the sheriff's department, including potentially an impeachment process so that the Board of Supervisors would have the power to impeach, whether it's Villanueva or any sheriff, right? Because we've seen that this is not, while he absolutely is demonstrating, a particularly brazen brand of this law enforcement bravado and lack of care for our communities, it's also not new, right? And it's really more indicative of the system and the system that continues to empower people like Sheriff Alex Villanueva, right, than just, Sheriff Villanueva himself. And so we really got to not only think about, what this election and future elections for sheriff look like, but also what are the safeguards that we are, advancing and that, folks really appreciate you uplifting Cerise and the powerful Black woman journalism that folks like she and you and others push to help bring this stuff to light. And it's so important, that we're pushing for multiple forms of accountability as well.
One more thing, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about this dude, but, that LA Times interview with him was the conversation where he revealed his attitude about Black people was very telling, but even more telling, like he actually categorized Latinos and pretty much said the new immigrants are cool because they'll just put their head down and work and say, yes, sir. But the people who have been here for a minute, i.e. Chicanos or, second generation, they're spoiled. And they, they're just as bad as, as much as said, they're just as bad as Black people. So that's, right, I guess, his way of saying, it's okay to kill an Andres Guardado because, he's spoiled. Whereas, so that he can seem to be Mr. Pro-Latino and try to get the Latino vote, but still have an excuse for murdering a lot of Latinos on his watch. I mean, that's my interpretation. How did you receive that?
Well, number one, just pure anti-Blackness, right? And divide and conquer, tactics, explicitly trying to drive a wedge between, the very real Black and brown progressive caucus that is growing within Los Angeles, right? Very real attempts to drive disunity, to drive, paranoia and anti-Blackness within, the non-Black Latino community. And in a, disgusting way, like you said, you brought up Andres Guardado, and there are other folks, again, who are perfect examples of actually amazing working class folks, right? Andres Guardado got a job during the pandemic because his parents had been laid off, right? His parents, one of whom I believe his father was a union member with Unite Here Local 11, working in the hospitality industry. These are, solid, hardworking folks, right? This was a young person, who got this job to help feed his family during an unprecedented global pandemic that was shot down because a sheriff's deputy wanted to be in a sheriff's gang. And the fact that, he's using this kind of rhetoric, this kind of anti-Blackness and this kind of demonization of even, particular sectors like you named within the Latino community is really indicative, again, of this divide and conquer tactic, of this, really fear tactic, using the insecurity of the time that we're in, the inequality, the housing and food insecurity, the scarcity that we're in, the poverty that folks are feeling, to drive, fear and disunity for his own personal, benefit.
Mm. Well, speaking of, people's insecurity, food insecurity and such, we've got a few minutes here before news and traffic, but Friday is the deadline for the housing rental assistance. So if you want to get your rent paid on the COVID relief dollar, if you even want to get your mortgage paid, utilities also, if you have debt that's stacked up. But because so much money is unclaimed right now, they also will pay utilities and they'll pay future rent if you can show that you're going to continue to have a hard time paying rent as a result of the pandemic. You only have 2 more days. And the thing, Joseph, that makes this to me even more crucial for our community is that the statewide eviction protection ends Friday. But if you're in the pipeline to get that rental assistance, it will slow down that process and possibly prevent you from being evicted. So lots of reasons to get in this pipeline. Housing is key. You can type that in. Just type in housing is key, and you'll get that. That will pop up. But there's also a phone number. It's 833-430-2122. I know not everybody is great with the internet. 833-430-2122. And you can call, and they will help you fill out this thing. I just want, I'm sure you have plenty of experience and understanding why this is so important.
Absolutely. And again, working with youth in LAUSD specifically, there are nearly 20,000 homeless youth in LAUSD, which is a huge number, right? And there are huge numbers of houseless folks and housing insecure folks in our community. So absolutely, please call in for folks who are listening and need assistance with those resources. Please call in or visit that website. And also, that's one more reason why we should continue to examine these huge and bloated police budgets, right? That 2 years after a pandemic, folks are still housing insecure, are still job insecure, are still struggling to recover, right? And yet police departments, from the sheriff's department to LAPD to the Los Angeles School Police Department, right, continue to get tens of millions to billions of dollars, right, to criminalize and abuse and kill our folks, while so many of our folks are suffering, deeply from this pandemic and other issues.
Well said. All you have to do is go to any search engine and type in "housing is key" and it will pop up. You could also call 833-430-2122, 833-430-2122. We've got news and traffic. We're taking your phone calls at 800-920-1580, and we're continuing our conversation with Joseph Williams of BLMLA. KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward. Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes, indeed. This is what we do, hour one. We usually talk LA County, and how it impacts and, really reflects upon the entire nation. I do that with a partner in politics today. It's Joseph Williams. He's an organizer with Black Lives Matter LA, but also Students Deserve. And there is a lot going on still with our young people. We're coming out of masks, coming out of the sort of pandemic version of learning into some kind of not normal, but other hybrid. And young people are still dealing with a lot of challenges. And I know you work with them every day. We have a new school superintendent here in Los Angeles who comes, highly recommended, but it's always an issue of, how they'll do in this environment, because Los Angeles is more than a notion. His name is Alberto Carvalho. I don't know if you want to talk about him at all, or how you see his impact on all of these challenges that young people are facing right now.
Sure. And absolutely, very, very interesting to have a new superintendent in LAUSD, the second largest school district in the country. And he comes to us from Miami. And, highly regarded is really dependent on who, you're asking, right? A good friend of mine, Dr. Amiri Baraka, who has done, education justice work for quite a long time nationally, as a lawyer and as a, researcher, a PhD holder, right? Done a lot of research on school districts nationally. And Miami had a huge increase in school policing and in moving towards, charterization and privatization under this, under Superintendent Carvalho. So it's really important for folks who have been paying attention here and folks who have been advocating for more resources for our public schools, to save our neighborhood public schools like Crenshaw High, right, to protect our students from increases in policing and criminalization in our schools. It's been really important for folks to, let him know as he's coming into this district that things are not going to be in LA like they were in Miami, and that there's a very strong student-led movement in LAUSD pushing primarily, and not primarily, but firstly, against the criminalization of youth, right? To divest from school policing. It's still, the LA School Police Department still gets over $50 million a year. But also to invest more in the resources that students need, especially coming out of a pandemic. Again, we already named that there's over 20,000 homeless students, that we have countless students who are dealing with food insecurity, countless students whose families have dealt with job insecurity during the pandemic, and yet we're pumping tens of millions still into school police who have been demonstrated, right, to discriminate and criminalize, especially Black students. So we actually had a meeting with the superintendent this Monday where Black student leaders from Crenshaw and Dorsey, from Hawkins, from Narbonne, from schools all around the district, met with the superintendent, shared their experiences with school police, with being criminalized and pepper sprayed and searched, and made to feel like a suspect and a criminal on their own campuses, and really demanded, that as he come into the district, that he listen, especially to Black student voices as they're saying, we won't go backwards, right? We already cut 50 or 25 million from the school police department. We already got cops removed from campus. We already got pepper spray banned in the school district, and we're not going to move backwards, right? And as a matter of fact, what we've done is not enough. And they really demanded that he continue to defund school police and invest in reimagining what school safety looks like, invest in trauma-informed care, invest in preventative resources, invest in families, right, in parent support and resources, and so many other things that we know our students and our communities really need. And it was a really powerful movement. And students are also right now passing out 30,000 buttons that say fully defund the LA School Police Department throughout LAUSD to demonstrate really the breadth of support, again, amongst Black youth, brown youth, and many indigenous youth and all these students who are coming together to say, we're united against criminalization, and we're united demanding that you see us as students first, right?
Yeah, well, that's great news that the students were able to meet with him, because I know our student organizers in Los Angeles do not play. Many of them are very, very, very well versed in a lot of issues, more than most adults I know. How did he receive that information or that energy, really?
Oh, man. It was a great welcome moment. He was definitely, I think, taken aback. The first 30 minutes of the meeting, we let him know that students were going to lead the meeting, that we weren't going to hear from him, that he was going to hear from students. And so students back to back to back, again, passing it to students from different schools, sharing their experiences, sharing, their demands for the new superintendent. And by the time he got to speak, he was flustered. He was visibly flustered. He said, I thought I would get a chance to introduce myself too. And it was like, nah, this is about the students. We're not here to, watch your dog and pony show. We're here to let you know that you're coming into a district that doesn't lack leadership, right? That doesn't lack strong voices, that doesn't lack community involvement, that doesn't lack student leaders who are very sure about what they've experienced and what they need and what they're demanding for their schools. And so I think that was eye-opening for him and for so many folks who expect, again, Black and brown students, especially Black students, Black girls from low-income communities, to just accept what anybody else is going to do about them, right, and for them and to them, right, and to their education. And so these students were saying, nah, nothing about us without us. You're coming into a district where if anything is going to happen, that students must have a say, that Black student leaders must have a say, that students deserve, that the Police Free LAUSD Coalition must have a say in what's going on, especially as it relates to Black students.
And a really important point, too, because one of the things I was encouraged about Superintendent Carvalho is that, he reportedly was unhoused as a child and went through some hard times. So I thought, well, hopefully he'll be able to relate. But, many moons and many salaries later, it's hard to know where people are. And certainly L.A. is not Florida. And one of the things I know for sure about Florida, it seems this is one of the places where we're always seeing those viral videos of so-called resource officers throwing kids to the ground, arresting little tiny kids, manhandling children, or maybe I should say cop handling children in a way that, is very disturbing. So I'm heartened to hear that the children, because they are children, no matter how effective their activism, that the children were able to make it plain that, you're not in Kansas anymore.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, too, that, California is, to my knowledge, the only or one of the only states where school police have actually killed people, right? Raheem Brown was killed by school police in Oakland in 2011. And just, 6-8 months ago in September, a school security officer in Long Beach shot and killed 18-year-old Mona Rodriguez, right? And earlier that same week, a Los Angeles School Police Department officer shot a man outside of Carver Middle School in South Central. So these are not, as many people would argue, different from the police in LAPD or the Sheriff's Department. These are the same trigger-happy, the same, biased police that come into our schools and that terrorize these kids, right? And you mentioned also, some of the superintendent's own background, and it was really awesome in the meeting. He did that himself, right? He wanted to share with students, I was homeless, I experienced this, I was an immigrant, I experienced criminalization, has been arrested before. He, named that at one point he was, quote unquote, what folks would call illegal or undocumented, right, as an immigrant to this country. And the students turned it right back around on him. We appreciate, Sierra Leone Anderson, 10th grader, powerful student leader. So we appreciate that you've had those experiences. And even more so for us, that means that you should stand on our side because you should understand what we're saying that we have experienced and what other students have experienced.
Amazing.
And you should know that we have to end these systems so that students don't have to continue to experience those things. It was so powerful, right? Unscripted, these students just holding him accountable and saying, you can't just say, oh, I've experienced these things, so I understand. No, it takes action, right? You have to stand with us. You have to stand with the folks who are experiencing it now. We all know that you came in here on a $450,000 salary, right? That might be your background, but that's not where you're at now. And you have to listen to the folks who are there now, and really take action around their demands. If you say that you care about us in the way you do.
Joseph Williams, Students Deserve is one of the organizations that he works with. I'm going to continue this conversation. There's an action today. We'll look at that. And I want to look at what else needs to be done and is being done to help young people right now. KBLA Talk 1580.
You have the right to remain silent, but don't let them hear you on KBLA Talk 1580. Less BS per broadcast. Fewer microaggressions per megawatt. KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes, indeed. And we have so much to talk about. Interesting, conversation about schools, too. Joseph Williams of BLMLA and Students Deserve. First of all, there's a lot of talk about how student enrollment is declining in public schools. We're hearing about schools closing. At the same time, we know that children are having a lot of multiple crises. You don't just pop out from a pandemic, especially if you're a kid. I mean, adults still don't know how to act, right? They're doing crazy stuff. Well, I don't know how we expect kids to just magically pop out. I remember how long a month seemed when you were, 15. Imagine 2 years of masks and being, scared every day and watching people die and get sick and all that. So I guess it's a two-part question. Like, what's your take on this whole situation with enrollment declines and school closures? But also, what do we need to do to help children right now to get, to being okay and hopefully thriving?
Oh, well, these things I think are definitely connected, right? And I think the health of our public schools is connected to the health of our communities. And the enrollment decline and the Black student enrollment decline, in particular over the past few decades, really has mirrored the way that Black folks and low-income folks have been pushed out and are continuing to be pushed out of LA, right? And so we are seeing, quote-unquote enrollment decline in part because of the housing insecurity and the ongoing, again, push out of Black folks and price out of Black folks from Los Angeles. And also because of the way that our students have been treated in schools, right, and underserved in schools and over-criminalized in schools, that, folks have so often felt we have to find alternatives. And so that's why it is so important, right, to really be reimagining what public education looks like, reimagining what school safety looks like, reimagining what investing in our students looks like, especially after an unprecedented pandemic. I cannot imagine, right, as a student who as a kid who dealt with housing insecurity and homelessness when I was growing up, and who school was a safe haven for me at many times, right? As paradoxical as that was, because I was also criminalized at school and ended up getting locked up. But I can't imagine how kids who are dealing with housing insecurity, are dealing with, family and community violence, have had to deal with that for the last 2 years, at some points being completely locked out of schools, at some points being completely cut off from their social networks and their friends and supportive adults. And so it is hugely important for us to just invest deeply in caring for our kids, invest deeply in their social, emotional well-being. And so we're actually calling folks to come with us next Tuesday, April 5th. We are going to be at the school board demanding, again, not only that the school district divest the $52 million that they continue to spend every single year on policing and criminalizing our students, but also to invest those resources and even more into social emotional well-being, into trauma-informed care, into preventative care, into psychiatric social workers and family supports, because you're absolutely right. Our students especially are dealing with trauma that, is unprecedented. And I think that us as adults, it's hard to even wrap our heads around just the level of trauma and isolation that not only the pandemic, but this very visible police violence and this very visible housing inequality and insecurity and rising wealth inequality, that's going on, and the wars that are going on, and the destabilization, of countries in the global south, and all these different things that are happening that are so very visible to them, in addition to their own, communal poverty and trauma and violence that still exists, right? And so it's so important to invest deeply, because this is our future.
Absolutely.
These are literally our future.
Joseph Williams, we'll talk about today's action when we come forward. But, of course, Tuesday, April 5th, school board meeting. That's on your to-do list. Family, it's KBLA Talk 1580, unapologetically progressive.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580. Find a righteous rage, and don't be afraid to say what you see. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
We do have a lot to talk about. In the next hour, we're going to talk, freestyle phones. Plus, we're premiering a new thing called Wealth Building Wednesday. Makes sense to do it on the Angelversary of Nipsey Hussle, focusing on buying the block and black businesses. Right now, Joseph Williams is joining me. He's with BLMLA and Students Deserve. You called on the delegation, the KBLA delegation, as I like to call us, to show up on Tuesday the 5th at the school board meeting. What time is that?
That is a great question. We are still trying to figure out exactly from the district when call-in will be. But you can follow us. You can follow us at LA_Students Deserve. And that information, as soon as we get it, will be posted there. There will be a toolkit so that folks can, have talking points and will know when they can show up. It'll also be a email template if you can't make it in person, so that you can email or call in your public comments. So we'll have a bunch of ways for folks to be able to make their voices heard. So follow us at LA_Students Deserve on Instagram, or LA_Students DSRV on Twitter. And that information will be on there.
All right. Got about a minute before news and traffic. I know that there's an action today because it's Wednesday. And by the way, thank you so much, Joseph Williams, for joining me this morning. It's been really informative.
Absolutely. Every single Wednesday, as Baba Akili would say, we are at 1313 West 8th Street, demanding an end to police associations that protect the officers who kill and abuse our people. Please join us 1313 West 8th Street every single Wednesday with Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. Come through, my people, and thank you so much for inviting me, Dominique. You are such a joy.
Thanks, Joseph. 1313 West 8th is End Police Associations, or cartels, as I call them. What time is that again? It's 3:30, right?
4 p.m. 4 p.m. every Wednesday.
3:30 my time, which means I'd get there at 4.
There you go. There you go.
All right, Joseph. I appreciate you and appreciate the work that you're doing with young people and the work that the young people are doing with all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dominique. We appreciate you uplifting their voices.
It's time to call me. 800-920-1580. We're paying tribute to Nipsey Hussle. We're doing wealth building because it's Wednesday, and we have freestyle phones. All that's going on. KBLA Talk 1580. Free the mic.
KBLA 1580.